Talks. We welcome Mr. Krishnamurthy Vijayan, who is the CEO of JP Asset Management India Private Limited. Based in Mumbai, Mr. Krishnamurthy rejoined the firm after a 5-year hiatus. Immediately prior to rejoining JP Asset Management, he was CEO of JM Financial Mutual Fund. As he is popularly called in this organization, Krish obtained Bachelor of Commerce and Master of Arts degrees from Ravi Shankar University, as well as a Master degree in Software Technology from NCST. Krish has extensive knowledge and experience in the Indian mutual fund industry and continues to be a member of a number of industry committees, including the Governing Board of Association of Mutual Funds in India, FICCI Capital Markets Committee, BSE Index Committee, and SEBI Committee on Investor Education Training Material. He is also chairman of the Standing Committee on AMFI Registration. I'd ask Puneet to present a bouquet to Mr. Krishnamurthy.
Can you hear me? Quite clear. After 22 years of selling mutual funds, actually speaking, most of the time I don't need a mic, but just in case. Have any of you seen this map before? Now, when I went to JP Morgan to ask them to start the business of mutual funds in India again, one of the suggestions was that in China, we had begun the business with just one branch in Shanghai. Then we opened another office in Beijing. And it's a very successful business. Today it's about $24 billion. And I was going there with a business plan which said that in the first year I'll have 6 branches. In the second year I'll have 12 branches, and so on and so forth. And they asked me that if 50% of the money comes from Bombay, why do you want to have so many offices? Very logical question. And that's when I presented this map to them, which essentially says, look at China. If you're there in Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangdong, it's not coming to the end? Okay. Yeah, I switched to no accent. It's a large waistline, sort of sagged on the bottom. It's, as I was saying, if you look at the middle of China, it's completely empty. And that is the great advantage of the inclusive development that India has practiced over the many years. Most of you are centered in Goa. You would probably, maybe, have heard of Orissa. Yes. How many of you have heard of a place called Jharsuguda in Orissa? Okay, not bad. Usually when I ask this question in Bombay, it's as good as saying Kazakhstan or something. In Jharsuguda, 6 major industries are being set up. 1 ultra mega power plant is being set up. Which to me means that something like about 4,000 people will be earning salaries and can open an SIP account with me. Whereas in China, they can first develop Beijing, then develop Shanghai, then develop Nanking, and pick up one province at a time. Shenzhen is, I think, the one that's going on now. In India, the tendency is that you do what's called inclusive development. Today, my talk is about the budget. Most of you, I'm sure by now, the entire cynicism of the budgeting process would have reached you already. People are cynical about the budgeting process because what is the headline that you see after the day after the budget? A populist budget, an election budget. Things like that. It reminds me very often of Aishwarya Rai having acted in a Vivek Oberoi movie, The Ghastly Flop, with Chidambaram and Manmohan Singh. But if you look at the budget in totality, you'll realize that it's not all that bad. And it's achieving exactly that objective which in a democratic country will need to be achieved, which is a great show of social good, which in our language means wasting money and throwing it into the hands of corrupt politicians, and underneath a clear layer of very, very solid directional structural change. I'm not going to waste too much of your time going into percentage of taxation and stuff like that. Since I'm essentially from the fund management industry, what I look at is this budget, the trends that this budget has been demonstrating over the many years in many governments, and I'll also be talking about how you can play the market using the trends in these budgets. Because unless, let's say a famous story about the guy with the hammer, everything looks like a nail. To me, everything in any policy, any budget, looks like something by which I can make money. Let's go in from here. And therefore, to answer the first question, yes, it's worth analyzing, but in greater detail than is normally done in newspapers. The agenda today, it will be a covering of the background of the budgeting process. I think this would have been probably done to that each year, so I'll just skim through this. The second, I'll take the headline items and what are the actual implications, because many times the interpretation of these implications makes a lot of money for us. Third, other items of major interest, which are the direct taxes. Naturally, most of you will be paying direct taxes next year or year after next, so you'll be interested in that. And then we will go to major changes in indirect taxes. Direct taxes does have some structural implications on savings. I'll talk about that. And then, just to understand how the minutiae, the little things in the budget can make a difference to the way you can make money on the stock market, I'll talk about 5 or 6 sectors. And then, think in terms of what the budget could be really aiming to do over the next few years to create some major structural changes. If at any time I'm boring you to death, please switch on your mobile phones. First of all, the entire secrecy surrounding the budget is because when this budgeting process came into being, evidently there was no internet, no newspaper, no TV. Most of the secrecy surrounding the budget today is not real secrecy. The Association of Mutual Fund goes there and makes its presentation. FICCI goes there and makes its presentation. The Chambers of Commerce, the various chambers of industry make their presentations. They are consulted. Even if we don't decide to go, we will be called, we will be making presentations. Therefore, very clearly, the amount of secrecy inside the budget is not too much. A. B. There is a system very nicely called the ship of state is the only ship which leaks from the top. So they send out little feelers saying that into the media saying, suppose this happens. And if there's a lot of reaction, it's off the budget. Good or bad. Because every good has an equal and opposite reaction on the bad side. You will also find that over a period of time, because of the fact that there is an immense amount of analysis, the budget is never used to communicate a painful thought. No finance minister is going to go down in history in a blaze of glory. He only wants to go down in the next elections as having been elected with a vast majority. Do not expect major news in the budget which is sort of industry friendly or pro-rich or whatever. This, in fact, have you been seeing the credit policy, the monetary policy, the budget trends over the last few years? Bimal Jalan started this. Practically anything that has to really make a difference is done either before or after the actual budgeting exercise. Second, by consulting, by and large you soften the blow and you can soft sell certain concepts, which makes it easier for the industry to absorb it and the market to price it in. Again, nobody went down in history for causing the market to go up and down in a big way. Because there is too much money to be made and lost if you create artificial volatility. I'd like to just touch on one aspect that most of you are probably familiar with. As of now, what does the budget do? the budget, imposes taxes, and shows how it is going to be spent. To some extent, it can tap people on the shoulder and say, why don't you take this path? The time when it could actually push you into a particular place is gone. Therefore, if you look at anything that can make serious money for you, you're going to have to look at fine print the budget and see how it can be played not only in the Indian stock market but actually internationally. You will find such arbitrage opportunities as we go along. Therefore, any changes that you see will be the structural changes, nothing to do with the budget. If SEBI has to have a mechanism by which international funds can be managed domestically, it is a structural reform, not a tax issue. The headline items. First and foremost, of course, the one that has been most written about, the write-off of 60,000 crores. I was talking to a couple of your classmates today. Most people believe that this is an act of gross fiscal indiscipline. Have you all heard of the subprime crisis? Yes. What is the subprime crisis? At the base of the subprime crisis are a whole number of people who have borrowed money, who had no business to be given loans in the first place, and after having given loans, those loans are no longer recoverable. These loans on the books of the public sector banks were subprime loans. Any prudent accountant would have told them, please write it off. It is not worth keeping it on your books. Put it down to 1 rupee. If you recover, it's a bonus. Effectively, by a fiscal fear, the finance minister has compelled banks to write off these loans because they are as good as written off anyway. You can't collect on them. Second, he is re-securitizing these loans, which means in effect, there are going to be measures to bail the banks out. When this gets written down, then NAV of the bank itself, the larger bank, is going to come down, right? He's infusing further capital. Two flips. One, the books are cleaner, therefore the stocks are worth buying. Two, there's fresh capital infusion coming in, which means the bank becomes bigger in the real sense of the term. Have you been seeing the last 2 days banking stocks have been thrashed? What would you do now? Which bank would you buy? Indian Bank, for instance, has the largest volume of such loans. So actually speaking, the contrarian would go and see which of these banks has the largest volume of such loans being written off. Because what it means is, for the first time, he has actually got a chance to take off $2 or $3 billion worth of complete garbage from his balance sheet and get it refinanced. Why is it a bad thing? People are complaining not because the act itself is bad, but because the temptation is for me to forget this, go to the nearest bank, take a loan and not pay it back. That message is unfortunately going to be there. The second thing is that, is it benefiting the intended person? That's the social aspect. To me as an investor, I don't care. But frankly speaking, if you're looking at the social aspect, it may not be reaching the person who is intended, because the guy who is committing suicide has not taken a loan from the bank. He has taken a bank loan from me, and I'm thrashing him in the morning to get the money back. So that's why he's committing suicide. Therefore, it may not achieve the social objective, but it has wonderfully achieved one objective, which is to make our banking sector more attractive. Second, let us look at this item, which is again done a bit of a headline grabbing, which is the securities transaction tax, which is when you buy or sell a share, you pay a tax, and the short-term capital gains tax rationalization. Are you familiar with the provisions, or should I label this a bit? I would say, very simply this, that short-term capital gains tax has become separate from income tax. Previously, you could set it off against your income. You took your income, set up the STT that you paid. So of course, this is hugely exaggerated. If you have this much income and that much trading, you're a very dumb trader. But if suppose you had done this, you would have paid only tax on 50,000 rupees. But now you will be paying the STT plus you will be paying your income tax. Right? And that's why the tax impact is good. Why is it good? Because a lot of people are trying to make money out of day trading. Day trading is a brilliant thing to do when the market is doing very well. But unless you're an extremely savvy trader, it's the best way to get slaughtered in a bad market. Short-term capital gains tax, same thing. It's gone from 10% to 15%, at 5% additional. In a bad market, and I expect the next 2 years to be really bad, I don't think it's too much of a problem. Okay. I'll now be covering two aspects, the direct taxes and the indirect taxes. When I speak about either of them, if you have any particular interest, please ask me questions. Remember that I'm a salesman, therefore I respond best when somebody asks me questions and I can answer them. Direct taxes, the first and foremost, this is really very good because for the first time it is slightly in advance of inflation in terms of giving the exemption limit. Really speaking, today there are 155 million households, 155 million households, salaried households in India, which earn 5 lakhs or below. 155 million households going from 3 lakhs to 5 lakhs will become practically tax neutral. Because remember that each of these slabs is removed, then your savings of 1 lakh is removed, and the 35% savings rate means about 1,50,000 is the normal savings. 155 million households can actually benefit from this. What does this mean to me? This means to me that it's a brilliant automobile sector buy. Because when people save money, the first thing that they usually buy nowadays is something in the automobile sector. Second, it is also a signal that while the retail play is not widely available, you might start looking at FMCG, which has been a complete non-favorite for quite some time. Other than, of course, which would be the one FMCG company that you would not look at? ITC. Because ITC has got VAT on the tobacco side. How much of ITC's revenues come from tobacco and how much from other businesses? 42%. Exactly. Which is why the hotel business of ITC, which has been given that heritage, World Heritage status benefit, it is not unlikely that ITC will actually benefit substantially over the next 3 to 5 years. If you have a horizon, maybe people will be beating down ITC today. In the last 3-4 days, we have been seeing all analysts on CNBC have been saying ITC is a bad buy. ITC has been hit yet again. They forget that what God gives with one hand, He takes away with the other hand, or vice versa. And our job is to see which hand is getting the money. Item 3 talks about the 5-year tax holiday to 2-star to 4-star hotels in cities which have been designated as World Heritage Sites by UNESCO. ITC, if you remember, has set up a subsidiary called the Fortune Group of Hotels, and these Fortune Group of Hotels are all budget hotels. 2 restaurants, good quality rooms, typically like a days in kind of a thing if you're used to the American equivalent. Withdrawal of the banking cash transaction tax is more of a joke than anything else. If you remember, this was introduced to track black money or something. If any guy is withdrawing cash at 10,000 rupees or 20,000 rupees and 25,000 is the maximum you can withdraw. If he has 25,000 rupees worth of black money, probably I think let him keep it. The double, okay. This is a little tricky. How many of you are familiar with the provisions of Section 80M? 80M was the old section which used to say intercorporate dividend is tax free. One company pays dividend to another company, is tax free. This is sort of a restoration of that. If Tata Power pays a dividend, it will pay a dividend distribution tax. Money, part of that money or a large part of that money will go to Tata Sons. Now Tata Sons pays a dividend, again there will be dividend distribution tax. Now they have removed that anomaly by allowing the person to set it off, the company to set it off. Short-term capital gains tax, of course, I have already covered. Indirect taxes. Frankly speaking, central sales tax is probably one of the most absurd of taxes because the cost of collecting that tax is higher than the cost of than the money you get from it. It is like, using petrol to mine coal, and the cost of the coal is equal to the cost of the petrol you spend on mining it. Anyway, they can't disband an army of some 1 lakh employees, so CST will continue. I am a little surprised by this. There is no change in peak custom duty. Sorry. Remember point 3 here. I'm going to talk about this a little more when the steps further. There's a thought on tourism. I'll be talking about that. I forgot to mention that. Okay, going back here. Peak customs duty, I was expecting it to actually be brought down. However, the resistance to it is tremendous. And really speaking, from 20%, bringing it down to 15% probably wouldn't make a huge difference. Remember that it is not the man on the street who is worried about import duty on cars coming down. The guy who is worried about it is Ford, who has set up a factory. Therefore, customs duties on certain items being high is actually for us beneficial because it supports Indian stocks. Most of these others are cosmetic. Service tax limit raised from 8 lakhs to 10 lakhs. That's because the cost of collection was huge. Service tax added, this is the one that I'm happiest about. This was the only point in the entire budget presentation that I actually stood up and cheered. The biggest rival to the mutual fund industry is the insurance industry. They launch products similar to ours because they are more remunerative and less tax intensive. People tend to prefer to invest in ULIP rather than mutual fund schemes. I practically stood up and cheered when they said that asset management fees or ULIPs will be taxed. But we are taxed in any case. Services added to the service tax next. This is all right. There is one thing that you must keep an eye on. Customized software is coming under service tax, but more importantly, package software is coming under excise. Both these are again slightly negative for the IT industry. If this had not been done, I would have thought that there would be a lot of market for actually customizing a software. That is, you buy a package, do some customization, and try to call it a value-added service. But that's sort of closed. IT as a sector, I'm afraid, doesn't look as though it's going to be a great sector.
But doesn't it control piracy? If you are actually applying these kinds of taxes, doesn't it control piracy?
Service tax on customized software?
Yes.
It's not really a piracy issue because customized software is when I take a project in your office and come and build that software. When I'm building it, whatever I'm raising as a bill, on that service tax is charged. So customization, there's no question of piracy because it's a contract. It will actually encourage piracy to have central excise on package software. Because package software is a very low margin business. It is as low margin as mutual funds. Very low margin business. And it's extremely price sensitive. I'm not sure that's a very good measure. Now, the next almost 10 slides will be about various provisions of the budget, talking about specific industries and the benefits or otherwise. You will find that most of the industrial sector has benefited, barring cement and IT, which are practically tax neutral or tax negative. First and foremost, infrastructure. This is probably the single largest positive of the budget. If you look at the budgetary provisions, on national highway development alone, we have $129 billion being spent in the next 1 year. In addition to that, there is going to be almost close to another $150 billion being spent on infrastructure. This is the single biggest spending in any economy in our region, barring China. Remember that for an FIR, he doesn't look at India as India. He looks at it as an allocation to an emerging market. In any emerging market, barring China, a close to $300 billion spending on infrastructure is a huge, simply huge expenditure. Which means that people who have invested in the infrastructure sector have reason to believe that they can continue to accumulate even though the share prices are being beaten down. If you've all invested in RPL, the moment it reaches 200, average down. Don't try to sell it. RPL is one of those infrastructure funds. So infrastructure stocks will probably benefit, but not necessarily day after tomorrow. It's a play, the expenditure will take place, it will get converted into revenues, it's going to be 2 or 3 years. So if you've bought any infrastructure stocks, 5-year time period. Particularly if you've got something like HCC or IDRCL, which are less, IDRCL construction, which are less, have lower free float so that stock price doesn't go up. Any questions on the infrastructure sector?
So my question is, the value of the stock is better when you consistently show a rise in your net profit. Now, infrastructure as such to be a cyclical industry where one quarter could be really high, one quarter could be really low. So, in this volatility, how can we make better returns?
Don't trade on it quarter on quarter. Typically, an infrastructure, the bigger cycle is 7 years. So what you should do is that keep a 3 to 5 year horizon. Typically, in that period, the first 2 or 3 years, if you have very strong conviction and have bought stocks not based on dip but on research, you will buy the stock, see it through a dip, accumulate in dips if you have the money, which is always nice to be, but not necessarily that we have money when the markets are bad. At the end of about 3 years, you can start looking at the stock more closely, and you will get an opportunity in that 3-year average to do about 25 to 30% at least. When I said 25 to 30%, I meant that in a 3-year period, your average earnings per year is 25 to 30%. If at some point in time, you're so lucky that the market is acting absolutely crazy, and you have made that 90 to 105%, please book your profit. 3 साल का रिटर्न यदि 1 साल में आ जाए तो 1 साल में लेके घर बैठो ना. Why is the, I mean, that should not be an urge to go to 200%, but it doesn't happen. The deviation of this is there is going to be a huge investment in the transportation sector. There will be 3 sectors which will benefit from it which are not covered here. I have just picked up some stocks which were recommended by a couple of broking houses. Remember, why will transportation benefit? The moment you have wider roads, you can have bigger trucks. So investment will be going to the transportation sector. The best way to encash wider roads is to have really good cold storage. So companies which are going into the cold storage business would again take off from here. So when you are doing research of stocks, look at these underlying plays which will give you the opportunity to invest. Every fellow can look at it and say, road is being put up, Hindustan Construction is going to benefit. That's pricing. Where is the price? Where is the opportunity? The opportunity is saying, is there a chance that Volvo is going to list in India? Yes or no? Volvo is listed in London. $200,000 can be invested in London by you. Pick up $5,000. $5,000 is 2 lakh rupees worth of Volvo in London. The profit will ultimately find itself on that bottom line, right? Extend the thought. And that's how one makes money on the stock market. Sorry.
So what it also affect the logistics market, logistics?
Yes.
And those companies.
Logistics, yes, they will get benefit from price, lowering of price. Particularly Gati. Gati would benefit more than Blue Dart.
Yeah, more than Blue Dart. And whatever, since you talked about cold storage, so this agro-retail business, they may also be benefiting from this setting up a cold storage on the, so companies like the retail industry, the line industry, they may also see a better.
Yes, those are all exactly the way you extend the thought. For instance, Sula Wines is going to be a big beneficiary. Why? Because what's happening to Indian wine? Why don't people like Indian wine? Because it's transported in metal casks from Nashik to Bombay. When it's transported in metal casks, the wine is practically boiled. The moment you have better roads and better transportation facilities at a cheaper cost, you can send it either in oak cask or in a cold environment. Indian lifestyle is improving. People are drinking more wine. In the olden days, when you throw a party, if you kept a bottle of rum and a bottle of vodka, you were okay. Today, you have to have a white wine and a red wine. There are phenomenal investment opportunities in India. It's just learning how to play. Power equipment. We have been a very big investor in Bharat Heavy Electricals, for instance. But across the power sector, there are opportunities in the equipment manufacturing companies. The fourth player is going to have the next ultra mega power plant, and 5 more are proposed. Power generation is an opportunity which is quite unbelievable. Do you know that? Can you make a guess? Jammu and Kashmir, one of the most disturbed states in the country. How many hydroelectric power projects are going on? There are close to 9 projects, I believe now. 3 was a statistic which was valid over 3 years ago. Today there are totally 9 hydroelectric power projects being set up in a place like that. Who is going to benefit? Not the poor engineer who goes and gets kidnapped or shot there. The man who is going to really benefit is the guy who manufactures power equipment for that case. Now look at the bottom line of stock. I'm not going to dwell on these points. If you have any doubt about any of these points, please ask me. I'm just going to look at this as a stock market centric budget presentation, if you like. Look at these stocks. Between Jyoti Structures and Larsen & Toubro, look at it as a pure stock. Larsen & Toubro is a very broad-based infrastructure play. Jyoti Structures very specific. But the free float of Jyoti Structures is less than 30%. How many of you are familiar with the concept of free float? Free float in impact cost, 2 terms. Please remember that I speak a language which I have learned over 22 years. If you find any of my words are strange, stop me. In free float means how much of the shares are available in the open market for trading. Impact cost is a natural extension, which means that when I take 1 lakh rupees and buy shares in the non-peak period between 11 and 2, what happens to the stock price? Jyoti Structures, with 20 lakh rupees, I can put the stock in circuit. Larsen & Toubro with 20 lakh rupees, it won't even make a difference in the price. So when you're looking at this, remember that a stock which has a very high impact cost has this problem that the price may be artificially high if you're reacting to a dip. Therefore, if you're building a portfolio in the power equipment sector, I would suggest that in this order, you would probably have 70 or 80% somewhere here, and another 20 or 30% in the less liquid stocks. Again, the less liquid stocks will give you that immense opportunity at some point in time to make your money.
Sir, here in power equipment, are you only considering the power generation part, or you also considering transmission and distribution equipment?
Transmission distribution equipment, yes. There's a fund being set up, if you like, for transportation, transmission and distribution reform. So across the range, you will find opportunities. Across the range, you will find opportunities. You may also find opportunities in financial retailing in these sectors. There are companies like Edelweiss, Carby, who are all, Carby and Geogit are 2 companies which are focused on going into areas wherever an industry is set up. These are all companies which could give you an opportunity. These are in the financial services space, not very widely tracked stock. It will give you an opportunity. What I am saying is, look at this opportunity, see where you can extend it. You will find opportunities. Power Finance Corporation, for instance, is a stock which we discovered about 1.5 years ago. I think it was a $3 billion market cap company at that point in time. And it was researched by only 1 broking house in the entire country. Quite amazing what you can discover if you really study the markets. I put this up not because there is a great opportunity in India. By and large, steel can be played in 2 ways. Steel can be played in pure steel stocks or steel related stocks. However, Remember that in India, you're no longer restricted to playing only in the Indian market. The best iron ore producing company is listed in Brazil. The market has opened up dramatically for us. Playing steel, you could play steel because India and China are going to be huge consumers of steel for the next 10 years. But there are 16 or 26 listed companies between India and China which you can buy. But there are only 4 good liquid iron ore companies in the world. And the most liquid one is one in Brazil. This is a tremendous opportunity. The entire emerging market space has basically 3 key themes. 1, infrastructure development. 2, domestic consumption because the populations are huge. And the 3, they are either victims or beneficiaries of natural resources. India, for instance, is a victim of oil, but it's a beneficiary in chrome, it's a beneficiary in manganese, it's a beneficiary to a large extent in certain kinds of iron ore.
As China China has next Olympics going to be held there. China is a huge consumer of steel right now. But what if after that the consumption will obviously drop down drastically? What happens then to these stocks?
Just give me a second. Now, I'll just, how do I put it back up? Okay, let's not waste too much time on putting it up again. In China, if you see, this entire region has been developed brilliantly. But a huge amount of development is still left almost up to here. The entire Nanking province, for instance, is still extremely poor. So far, the development has been in Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Guangdong. Just 4 provinces. Guangdong is, in fact, the first one which really started. But there are an immense amount going right up to Mongolia, which is a protectorate, where they actually have a roadmap for investment in development. So in the next 10 years, yes, after the Olympics, yes, there will be a bit of a slowdown. Evidently, Olympics is headline news, but Olympics is more a showcasing of their abilities to create infrastructure rather than actually an infrastructure play by itself.
So the first point is that reduction of 5% in the scrap.
Yeah.
So generally,
Just 1 second, let me try and put it up. Thanks. Yeah.
so generally, you find that Japan has been a veteran in using scratch steel and reducing goods and services, whereas in India we still follow the traditional method of using the iron ore and producing the steel. So companies use that vast furnace method. So what will be the tune of investment that will go in to change their method? I mean, they have to change their method from converting this like steel from iron ore to a scratch steel process. So will this reduction induce them to do the same?
The benefit involved is small because it's not dramatic enough to make, say, a disco or somebody trying to Tata Steel to convert. Because iron ore is plentifully available and they are situated in the heart of iron ore land. So I would say that this is intended to sort of support the smaller manufacturers rather than to actually create a structural change in the way we go about manufacturing steel. That may not be a play in that sector. Pharma. Pharma is an excellent defensive sector. There are 3 major themes in pharma. One is the population of the country, because improving, a continuous thrust on improving Medicare. Evidently, the population of the country is. The second thing is generics, which is manufactured drugs which look like more expensive drugs. This has been slightly overhyped with the fact that patent litigation is neither cheap nor the outcome necessarily predictable. The United States, just like in India, is a home to a number of prejudices an Indian company repeatedly getting a judgment in its favor against an American company is neither likely nor probably desirable. We don't want all our cousin brothers to be sent home. Most of us have family members in the US anyway. So patent litigation is an expensive and non-successful reason for buying pharma. Therefore, in the last entire boom, by and large, pharma has been a defensive stock, a stock which does not get wiped out, but it does not really shoot the lights out either. This time, we have seen some amount of positives coming in, and we have seen the stocks which will benefit in the short term. However, I do not see any of them benefiting dramatically from this entire space. A, manpower in India has become expensive, so the third play, which is outsourced research, is going to be more and more difficult. Most of these excise concessions will not result in a dramatic reduction in prices. It will see a short-term boost to this sector. What I would suggest is next 4 or 5 months should ignore pharma and thereafter pharma again. However, companies which are into creating hospitals might benefit substantially from this recent tax holiday and the 125% write-off allowed on infrastructure. I would think that somebody like work hard is likely to be a long-term beneficiary, rather than going for a, let us say, a Dr. Reddy's, which is extremely patent focused as a group. Auto is a sector which is my personal favorite because I love cars. It's been my single biggest disappointment in life that most cars are too expensive to buy in India. Excise duty on small cars has been reduced. But what I'd like you to focus on is point number 3. Excise duty on hybrid cars has been reduced from 24% to 14%. Whereas on small cars it is 14%. Right? It's 12%, sorry. These 2 points. Just focus on this. When we go into the step further, we'll discuss that aspect. Personally, I think the biggest beneficiaries from this are going to be Tata Motors and Maruti Udyog. The others are probably not geared to slash prices so dramatically because they are in the setup mode. Hero Honda is actually a stock which has been beaten down very badly over the last few years, after having been a real hero of the stock market for some time. I personally believe that with the shift in lifestyles, two-wheelers are likely to be less popular than four-wheelers.
Nano is going to be a death knell for many of these guys.
Media and entertainment. Before I go into the details of this, frankly speaking, the media and entertainment industry has not benefited substantially. Do you know, and this is empirical data which has been studied over a long period of time, that whenever the stock markets are really, really bad, gambling companies and entertainment companies do exceedingly well. It's a very funny statistic, but the fact is that when people are depressed and they're not doing well, they need more entertainment. And therefore these companies, incidentally cosmetic companies, do very well during depressions. One must look at these plays. I would personally think the media and entertainment sector is going to be a great sector to look at in the next 2 years. But start looking at it now, but you can start buying it maybe by December, when the full impact of the subprime crisis is coming again. Today, the beneficiaries are people like Jagran Prakash and HT Media and all that. I would probably think that companies like Adlux, Z, and perhaps Bennett Coleman, because of its Zoom business, are likely to be substantial beneficiaries in due course. Times of India has not been very successful as a company in the electronic media sector, but they are also going into spaces like outdoor, where they are very successful. For instance, all the bus stops that you see in Bombay are all Times of India bus stops. Sorry, I'm not.
The metro railway advertising.
Yeah, it's tangible. So outdoor is an opportunity. Media and entertainment is another sector I'll be speaking about when we talk about a step further. This is a sector that has been grossly neglected, but in a country where the core theme is domestic consumption, this has immense potential. Overall, for the manufacturing sector, this budget has been extremely positive, barring two sectors.
So in the media and entertainment sector, how do we put a peg on stocks like Balaji Telefilms, which rarely have tangible assets? All they've got there is the shows running. Now these could stop anytime for any reason. So how do we actually decide how good the stock is?
Most of these companies depend on intellectual properties. It's like a software company. You value it, if you want to develop a valuation model, look at it like a software company, because most of this content is really software. Balaji Telefilms is a classic example of a company which is not yet professionalized. Because it is still extremely, one person centric. But it's a liquid stock also. It's a good play, I would say. But remember that two critical issues. One is it's extremely individual centric. Two, it is extremely illiquid. Surprisingly, what has happened in the recent run-up in the real estate space is that cement has changed from being a very favored industry of the media and the politicians to being an industry which has become sort of seen as being profiteering. This is unfortunate because capacity creation in the cement sector is vital for us. Prices will only come down if people expect to make huge profits and therefore create huge capacity. The other advantage of cement is that it is extremely employment intensive. However, since their last run-up with the finance minister last year, running in with the finance minister last year, I didn't expect too much to come to them. The IT sector has again not benefited much from the tax holiday provision, has not been extended beyond 2010. IT sector as a sector is going to face considerable heavy weather in the next few years. One is the exchange problem, exchange rate problem, and the second is the fact that in real terms, they have started overpricing their own services. The opportunity here will be for companies which evolve either a low-cost model or branch into training, which is why NIIT might be a better stock than, say, HCL, which belongs to the same family. The same broad ownership structure of family.
Regarding cement sector, I want to ask a question that there is a lot of investment around $1 billion in infra. So, my question is that impact of the budget on cement sector it is going to be positive only. Budget can be neutral impact on the cement sector, but overall it should be positive. What do you say about buying cement stocks like ACC, India Cement?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because of the infrastructure play, they are going to be benefited in any case.
So that means that even if budget has a negative impact, should go for buying. So that's what my
cement is an overall buy, yes. But perhaps instead of mega cement plants, you should look at the smaller ones which have a regional play. Free Cement, for instance, has the only cement plant in Rajasthan. And the entire Rajasthan belt is being developed aggressively for both tourism and as well as basic infrastructure. So look at the secondary cement companies rather than the headline cement companies. But cement as a sector is going to be grossly benefited. Yes. Okay, this is the last part of my presentation that I'm coming to, which is some thoughts that I have been having about whether the budget itself should be a tool of social change or it should continue to be an accounting exercise as it has been in the last few years. Remember, the budget is very much like Valentine's Day, falls in the same month too. A lot of sound and fury, on Shiv Sena protest, on somebody saying it's not Indian culture, lots of media hype and merchandising opportunity. But really speaking, on that one day, is there going to be a dramatic cultural shift from A to B? By and large, no. But it has been achieved in a few cases. One, mutual funds as a sector were not popular at all. People never bothered about mutual funds till it was decided that capital gains from mutual funds would be tax exempt in the long term and dividends from equity mutual funds would be tax exempt. Our industry has grown from about 12 billion US dollars when this entire thought came into being to more than 137 billion US dollars. What is more interesting is that in that 12 billion dollars there were typically about 25,000 SIPs. Today any mutual fund worth its name has a few lakh SIPs, systematic investments, which means these are market neutral investments continuously going on. The budget can be used as a tool of social change, and I believe there are a couple of areas where this should be done, and there is an opportunity for the government to do it. One, my favorite sector, which is the media and entertainment sector. Media and entertainment sector today is discounted because of the fact that the entire sector is looked as a disorganized, largely black money generating exercise. This is not the case. This is not the case except in India. And even in India, things are changing. Have you been noticing how many of these films are shot in London? And for no reason at all, everybody seems to go to London and have a good time and come back. You generally think it's because the producer has too much money, right? Not the case. If your film is financed by a fund in London, the person who invests in that fund gets a complete tax holiday for 15 years. English tax is about 45%. So remember that day one he has got a 45% return. Provided that fund, at least 70% of it, is shot in England with English people. Look at the implications of this. One, it's a tax holiday. Two, the producer gets money cheap because typically this lending is done at LIBOR plus. LIBOR plus. LIBOR plus means London interbank rate plus 2%, 3%. So he's getting a 6 or 7% return, which in England is a pretty good return. So he's got a 45% flat return, he's got a 6% return. The day the producer is able to sell it to the distributor, this guy gets his money back. And that difference is split between the producer and the actual financer by a sale and lease back arrangement. Therefore, no question of drug money coming in. It's clean money coming in because fund houses run such funds. Two, it does not mean that you have to be a very, very rich man to be able to produce a movie, provided you have a good concept. So it creates intellectual property, the software that we were talking about in Balaji, for instance. Three, it promotes tourism. The entire Lord of the Rings was shot in New Zealand because there are no electric wires overhead. New Zealand gives you the same tax pay. $100 million film. Which man will put $100 million behind a potential disaster? But if it's a large number of people, funds take those risks. It promotes tourism. And it promotes tertiary employment. The great advantage of this fund structure is it separates management and ownership. And by separating management and ownership, it can create quite a large change. This is one of the things that I hope to see in future. Second, infrastructure. Infrastructure funds, we made a nice statement about it 1 year back, but it's not really taken off. People are worried that infrastructure funds are a way by which foreigners will make money on Indian infrastructure. Not true. Let the money come from abroad. Let roads be built. Remember that the fund does not consist of managers, it consists of investors. So we can still build the roads our way, we can still give the business to Indian companies, we can still create an immense amount of wealth for ourselves by allowing infrastructure funds to come. Infrastructure funds, however, have not been given any tax breaks at all. I expect that by the next budget, these tax breaks will come in. Has anybody ever spoken to you about the Pepsi versus bottled water paradox? Everybody says that private sector will make up airport and then they'll milk you dry, they put up a road and they'll take toll from you. The fact is this, if they did not do that, we would not have the road. The Pepsi versus potable water paradox, as I call it, it's my own invention, that's why you've not heard about it before, is that in villages where you cannot get good drinking water, you can get a Pepsi. Because a can of Pepsi costs probably 50 paise. It is delivered for 6 rupees. The content is 90% water, 2% flavoring, and probably another 8% germs or something. But anyway, whatever that thing is, it's landing at that doorstep of that villager who cannot get drinking water because there is a margin to be made in it. The same is true of infrastructure. As long as infrastructure is created with some social objective, that is, it's going to be put up free, never get created. JP Morgan invested in China, which is an extremely controlled capitalist economy. We have got more than $4 billion invested in infrastructure in China. We put up entire roads. I mean, we financed entire roads. Why? We make money out of it. But China got the roads. Same thing is being tried in India. JP Morgan is setting up a $1.2 billion fund to finance infrastructure in India. But it's a very small amount. Totally, the requirement for infrastructure funding in India in the next less than 2 years is in the region of 300 into 4 is 1200 billion. What? 1,20,000 crores. 1,20,000 crores, I can assure you no government of India is going to be able to fund. Has to be created by enlightened self-interest. The final thought I'll leave you with. Have you read about the ethical index which is being developed by Crystal and somebody else? Global warming is a very, very big theme today. And really speaking, pollution is a major concern. I was never very much bothered about it till I took up long distance running, and I find that I developed, everybody runs for good health, na? I run for bad health. Because after every long distance run, I develop a bad cough, cold, fever, and I'm bleeding. Pollution is a severe problem in a place with industrial pollution. Ethical funds are funds which say that we will give you more money provided you follow norms which are required. Mercer Consulting, for instance, has done a huge survey across all BRIC economies to find out which are the countries in which US funds can invest. They are backed up by $3.5 trillion. $3.5 trillion of money which are going to invest in companies which follow good governance norms. India requires that ethical funds be given a special concession in India. There are many kinds of ethical funds, religious ethical funds also. But probably the ones that require it are things that are directed towards the environment.
Are there any ethical funds as of now?
ABN AMRO has got a socially conscious fund or something like that, ABN AMRO Mutual Fund. And I think INAM has set up an Islamic fund, but that's not a mutual fund, it's a PMC. But environment, only ABN AMRO. It's a huge business in Australia, Canada, not the United States, surprisingly.
So, sir, does their portfolio, ENAM and ABN that you told, their portfolio consists of some Indian companies also?
ABN AMRO is purely Indian. ABN AMRO is international companies. INAM is purely Indian.
Any names that you can tell of the companies in which this?
Offhand, I don't recollect their portfolios. Offhand, I don't recollect, but it's published, so you can always pick it up off the website. Just go to ABN AMRO Mutual Fund. Do a search for ABN AMRO Mutual Fund. Get the website. Yeah, ABN AMRO is the bank. They have their own mutual fund. And they have in India set up a socially responsible fund. The other thing is automobiles. If you remember, when I was talking about hybrid automobiles attract a 14% duty to small.
Can you tell more of these ethical funds? How do they operate?
Okay. Ethical funds are mutual fund schemes which invest according to a particular code of ethics. Well, first let me answer one doubt. Are other funds unethical? No, they are not. This is just that these funds are called ethical funds because they follow a particular code of ethics. There are Islamic funds, there are very strong Christian funds, there are environment funds. These are, I think, the three biggest classifications. Islamic funds because of the debt issue. Environmental funds, particularly in Canada and Australia, are very, very popular. For instance, Vodafone actually shifted its corporate headquarters, rather abandoned the project to set up a corporate headquarters in a green area because the ethical funds of Europe decided to dump them. They were shifting the corporate headquarters to a place which was largely a green area. And they abandoned the plan because the ethical funds threatened to dump them. So it can create a major. What are the essences of an ethical fund? First, there is the fund management principle which is laid down in the offer document. Second, there is always a governing board or an ethical board which looks at it. Like for instance, Malaysia launched a debt fund, which is an Islamic fund. How did they do it? They did it with zero coupon bonds. But they created a Sharia board which would sit on top of it and guide the fund managers to where they can invest. In India, there's an organization called Beauty Without Cruelty. If any of you are animal lovers, Beauty Without Cruelty publishes a book which classifies companies as red, amber and green in terms of whether they practice cruelty to animals or not. For instance, many of the cosmetic companies they will say is red because they test on animals. In between they were very strict, they were classifying even Titan, the wristwatch company, as being amber because it used to buy leather straps. And L&T was classified for a long time as red because it got a huge contract to make abattoirs. But now that has been separated. So typically an ethical fund would also describe to what degree will I conform to the ethical standard and have a board to direct it. But Beauty Without Cruelty's book is very interesting. Just pick it up. They have the complete listed universe of Sensex has been classified as red, green and amber. You have, for instance, funds which are anti-tobacco. Because if some people believe that tobacco is a very great menace, so they will not invest in companies which are in tobacco. UTI faced a big problem once when it invested in Venky's chicken, because the Jain investors wanted to withdraw from it. So any fund which operates on the basis of ethical principles for a particular religion or social group, whatever, is essentially that. Otherwise, it is not like a pure fund. It buys, it sells, it holds, does research, etc. But there is one other element.
Do these ethical funds also promote green investing?
Each ethical fund will have its own principle. There will be green funds, but the green fund will not care whether it's, let's say, it's debt. So a green fund, which is essentially about the environment, may not mind investing in a debt security.
No, because lately we have many companies who are going in for green investing, as investing in those products which are not like pollution generating, etc.
Exactly.
So, for example, biodiesel, etc. So, in that case, the chances of getting a return is like it's a very high risk, high return situation. So, are those part of ethical funds which focus on say the environment, as you said, one is on religion, one is on Islam, etc.
Ultimately, any fund has to be invested with one objective, which is to make money.
Right.
So remember that principles are fine, but it's always principles plus money. The base premise of an ethical fund is not that I will give money to somebody who is doing good, but that I will invest in somebody who is doing good and making money. So that and is completely not dilutable. Otherwise, there's no purpose in the fund. Otherwise, don't invest. Give it as charity. At least you'll get that 30% benefit. 30% benefit is the ATG benefit. I was coming to automobiles, but I think I have made my point. This is the last slide in my presentation. So we can now take any further questions.
So my question is regarding short-term capital gain tax, increase of 15% from 10 to 15. So why finance minister hasn't taxed the FIIs which operate through malicious route? They end up paying no tax. They are the main culprits for the volatility in the Indian market.
Not necessarily. I'll answer the question in two parts. One, why is the short-term capital gains not being imposed on FIIs? and then whether they are the cause of the volatility in the Indian market. Short-term capital gains tax is imposed on every investor in India, including FIIs. However, that gain can be set off or neutralized. If Mauritius is a tax haven, we have a double taxation avoidance treaty. The choice of a foreign investor is he can either pay tax in his home country or in our country, whichever is favorable to him. Right? As far as the FII is concerned, his home country is Mauritius. Regardless of where it originated, it comes from Mauritius very. Right? So he pays the Mauritius tax. The Mauritius tax today is 15%, but there is a 96% clawback, 96% rebate on that. So yes, an FII is liable to pay tax, but he gets it set off. He gets it returned.
Then what Indian government is doing to curb this Mauritius?
The Mauritius route was created to encourage people to come into the country. The best way to encourage people to come into the country is to give them a tax rebate. Worldwide, suppose you invest in Japan, you are based in London and you are investing in Japan. Mauritius does not apply. But the Japanese government gives the benefit that you can pay the net tax. If the tax in London is 13% and the tax in Japan is 12%, if you have paid this 13%, you don't have to pay this 12%. So worldwide, the principle is you pay tax in one country. So that's the principle of double taxation avoidance treaty worldwide. In India, we needed money to come into the stock market from abroad because local money was not so big. So we taxed it this way.
So don't you think it is unfair that local investors, they are paying 15% tax and the foreign investors, they end up paying nothing?
Nothing is a relative term. They end up paying 1.6% in Mauritius. Remember that the money is not necessarily about creating equality, but to see what is the maximum benefit that you can get. Let us assume that we slap them with a 30% tax, because domestic investors paying 15%, we slap them with a 30% tax. He will pull his entire money out and invest it in China, which is giving him the same benefit. He is not coming into India. FII is not coming into India because he loves you. He is coming into India to make money. And if you take away 15% of that revenue, maybe India is not attractive because ultimately it's a risk premium. Why would I invest in India versus, let us say today, Germany. Germany is giving about 20-25% less than India. I would invest in India because I'm getting 25% more. If that 15% goes up, as a European Union country, why should I invest in India? I'll put it in Germany, much less risk, much higher liquidity. Plus I don't have to explain to my investors. So it is a social objective being achieved, which is to generate liquidity for the Indian market. And that is being done by providing concessional tax. Otherwise, if you look at it, if you invest in a mutual fund, you pay zero tax up to 1 year. Same thing you put in an FD, which is also a government-owned Indian socially responsible bank, you pay 30% tax. Why? Because it is necessary to give mutual funds relief so that the money goes into the capital market instead of into loans. That's the socially directed investing is about that. Okay. The other aspect is, are FIIs responsible for volatility? Shall I address that or shall I answer your questions? Yes. Okay. An FII is not one homogeneous creature. Myself, I belong to JP Morgan. JP Morgan today invests 45,000 crores into the Indian stock market. It started in 1991. Its FII registration number is 1. In 1991, when it started, it had $100 million to invest. Today, we have close to $10 billion invested in the country. Our average portfolio turnover is 30%. It's nothing good about us. This is how we make money. We do not churn shares because we believe that if you hold shares, you make more money. So our average portfolio turnover is 30%, which means we sell over 30% of our stocks and book our profits per annum. Correct? Which means from $100 million to $10 billion, the money has steadily been increasing. Why are we keeping it in India? Because these are mutual fund schemes where I say JP Morgan India Fund. I cannot invest it in any other country. Therefore, necessarily by definition, I have to invest it in India. Right? So really speaking, my job is to invest in India and try to make benefit from it. If I feel that there is some structural reason for taking the money completely out of India, I'll have to return it to the investors. So at any point in time, I have to be 80% invested. But myself, HSBC, Fidelity, Templeton, quite a few of these funds are structured like that. We are called long-only funds, which means we take a long position and hold it. Long position incidentally does not mean long term, it just means that I buy the stocks. Then there are hedge funds. My cousin is actually managing a hedge fund. He manages the same amount of money, $8 billion. But his mandate is emerging markets. And this is a hedge fund. At the end of the year, he is not evaluated by whether he gave 20% and benchmark gave 10%. He is evaluated that your base return is 10%, you have to achieve it. If he sees the market crapping out, he sells and exits. That's it, he'll go to cash. And he may do a trade in a day, he may do a trade in a half an hour. His fund is structured for quick movement. Both kinds of funds coexist in the market. Just as day traders and long-term investors coexist in the market. FIIs by themselves are not responsible for the volatility as such. Because they are not, I would say they are amoral, in the sense that they do not care to achieve any objective for your market. They are there to make money. And their parameters are clearly defined. If the market craps out and I get redemptions, I have to sell. If I don't get redemptions, I won't sell. My cousin, on the other hand, market craps out, he's out. He has unwound his positions, he's out. Because his investors are given that money. Tomorrow, when the mutual fund industry becomes a $1 trillion industry, we will also behave like that. JP Morgan will continue to invest in India with a very, very long-term objective. But I belong to the long-only side. We have somebody called behavioral investing side. If we started a behavioral fund, we might very well start unwinding positions. So please don't look at any body of money as being completely homogeneous. Different parts of it behave differently. Your question, and then yours.
Sir, my question is, don't you think that this increase on short-term capital gain tax will discourage retail investors to invest in the stock market, which is contrary to government wants, which is to increase the retail investor base, which will reduce the volatility? Especially
increasingly, both the government and the industry feels that retail investors should not be encouraged to time the market. So yes, this is a sort of socially directed measure to discourage timing the market. A lot of investors, they may lose a lot of money because they tend to say that, okay, our market upar gaya, that paisa double. Our market niche gaya, paisa nikalo. But Sensex is only 30 stocks, of which 5 stocks may account for the full up and down. And so they tend to lose money. So increasingly, the tendency is that people should invest over. The average Indian investor invests for 105 days in equity. We are trying to push them towards 365 days or more because the international trend is 15 years plus. You can imagine what a gap there is to cover. So intention is to discourage short term.
I think the intention was right, but the timing is wrong for this.
Sorry?
The timing of the leverage of increasing the equity. I think the Apple would have done it maybe after some stability in the market.
That is debatable, I suppose. They have been wanting to do it for the last 2 years, but it takes the government that much time to react.
So how has the telecom sector received this money?
The telecom sector is in the midst of probably one of the greatest boom in telecommunication that has been seen in the history of the world. We have grown so rapidly that we have even beaten people like the United States, China and all that in terms of growth rates. I think the Indian telecom companies are more worried today about getting greater bandwidth than about 1% taxation. So they have not really received very adversely. And I don't think even the market has reacted very adversely to that.
So from the past, if you see 4 months, Reliance Communications and others, which were great performers, have come down from their highs quite steeply. So any reason why there has been a drastic fall in these stocks, and a number of research reports have come which say that on a longer term of say horizon of 1.5 years, stocks like Arcom, Bharti are not a good buy. Can you just...
I'll again answer this question in 2 parts. One, why have these stocks come off in the last 4 or 5 months? The answer is simple. They were grossly overbought by most people over the last 1 year. And they were due for about in the sense that even in a diversified portfolio, typically we take 10-12%. If you take Arcom, Bharti are essentially the same stock and Tata Telecom. So if you have all three of them and that accounts for 30% of your portfolio, you're grossly overweight. So people are rationalizing their portfolios a bit. So that is the reason they have come off. The second part, as to the long-term prospects, Bharti has been written off when it was 46 rupees, when it was 26 rupees, when it was 20 rupees, when it was 100 rupees. It will be written off quite frequently. Remember, Bharti is no longer a pure telecom play. Bharti is a telecom play, it's an insurance play, and it's a retailing play. You must study the stock a little more. Is it overpriced today? My belief is it is slightly overpriced. But people are not exiting that in any big way. I think if you're thinking of it as a part of your portfolio, look at it as being one of those family jewel stocks that you're buying it, keep it for a very long time. 4-5 years should be good.
So, adding to the same question, considering the boom of the telecommunication, on the other hand, the demand for setting up towers. So, in the same segment, companies like GTN Infra, though they are not strong on fundamentals, but they are having huge volumes being traded on the stock market. But on the other hand, if we see companies like Reliance, Idea and Vodafone, they have their own subsidiary companies for setting up towers. So this is a debatable issue going on in the market about these, especially tower setting companies or in the words telecom equipment companies. So what's your take on that?
In general, any of these infrastructure creation companies like GTL Infrastructure, Telecom Infrastructure should do well. GTL per se has had a slightly checkered history in management terms. So whether GTL per se is a good buy or not may be debatable. But in principle, I think those companies would probably have a better scope than pure telecom companies in the shorter term. 1.5, 2 years later.
My question is how much intraday trading affect the volatility as well as liquidity of stock? And secondly, with increase in the change in provisions of STT, effective tax to be paid by investors will increase. Mainly the intraday traders would be affected the most. My question is, would that really affect them because maybe the speculators may think that trading will be more cost benefit analysis by doing, they may think that they will get more benefit out of it trading rather than going for STT.
Well, I find that trading is something that people just love to do. So you might find that the trader continues to trade as long as he makes a difference. Only thing is that जो 25 पैसे में करता था, तो 60 पैसे 80 पैसे में करना पड़ेगा. So that is the difference. But I think trading will continue. Trading does give liquidity to the market, but it also induces volatility. Volatility is not necessarily a bad thing. If there was no volatility, there would be no market. So I think in terms of giving liquidity, they do, but it's not a very large liquidity. But they do benefit some of the most illiquid stocks. Stocks.
Yes, that means you want to say that FM had made the decision that means for collecting more taxes. In fact, he must be knowing that it should not affect the actual transaction business.
I don't. It will affect, but not because of the tax. It will affect because the market is going bad.
So when you go about taking calls on a particular stock, how do you go about doing it? More specifically, how much weightage is generally given to the technical analysis and to the fundamental analysis? How does JP Morgan do it?
Okay. Shall I answer this only about JP Morgan or should I answer it about the industry and
About
JP Morgan?
both industry and JP Morgan specifically.
The stock market ultimately is a place where a lot of people try to put some certainty around something that is largely unpredictable. So different fund houses have different styles. I'll talk about 3 styles of fund management and I'll explain the logic behind why those 3 styles are there. Let us take 3 very big houses, Fidelity, Capital. Fidelity is number 1 in the world, we are number 2, Capital is about number 6. What is the big problem that we face? The big problem that we face is I come and manage the money. Tomorrow I get a job with somebody else. What happens to the investor's money? Will it completely change its style, or will something happen so that the money has to be returned? What will happen? So essentially, to de-risk the money from individual vagaries, each fund house tries to create a discipline for management. Let us look at JP Morgan style first. Within JP Morgan, there is not one style. We have what we call the Pacific Regional Group, which is essentially for emerging markets. We have the Behavioral Group. We have the Emerging Markets Group. Then we have the Real Estate Group and the Infrastructure Group, etc., etc. How does the Pacific Regional Group, which is the Indian business as of today, do this? What we tend to do is we do not look at technicals at all. We don't look at the index at all. In fact, our CIO, when we started this business, the first talk he gave, he said, I don't mind you having a TV in the dealing room, but it should not be showing CNBC. I don't care if you put Star World, I don't care if you put V channel, but no CNBC. Well, I don't want you to look at what is happening to the index. So if you ask me today, what is the index today? I won't be able to answer. If I phone up my fund manager, he'll also not be able to answer because he's told to look through it. Then what does he do? Our fund managers, we have a team of 4 in India plus 4 in Hong Kong, managing this entire pool of money collectively. Every one of them only identifies stocks in the market. It is up to the fund manager to then put it together, or the fund managers to then put it together in the way they want. Every company is visited at least once every quarter. In a year, we do 600 to 700. Last year, we did about 800 company visits. One-on-one company visits, repeatedly by different fund managers so that they get the perspective. Once we are completely comfortable that this company will do well, to the best of our knowledge and belief, we buy the company. When do we buy the company? We are an open-ended fund house. So when the money comes in, we buy the company. When do we sell the company? Either when somebody puts in a redemption, or when we believe that we have made a mistake. The great advantage of this method of management is that nobody owns a company. Nobody says, "Ye mera stock." Like Jet Airways, we took it as a tourism play. Within 6 months, we realized that with this huge oil pressure and with very little entry barrier to capital in this sector, Kingfisher, come and go, I come and so many come in, we decided to sell it. Nobody argued with the case. Similarly, we bought Bharat Heavy Electricals 6 years ago. Then today we are accumulating this one. That is our style. Fidelity, on the other hand, does not believe that the fund manager should be doing research about it. The fund manager is to be sitting in his table, taking a decision based on information. So they have a research vertical which does all the company visits and research, and they feed information to the fund manager, who also gets research from all over the other broking community, and then he decides how to buy. Again, they are a very fundamental bottom-up house. But within my own system, we have what is called the Highbridge Group. The Highbridge Group is the world's largest hedge fund manager. They are also JP Morgan. And their job, they do not look at the fundamentals of the stock. The fundamentals don't matter. They look at trading volumes and technical analysis. So different fund managers will look at it differently. We look at it purely. Yes, please.
Sir, don't you think on one point this finance minister is encouraging long-term investment by increasing the FCD, but on the contrary, by allowing the FIs to go for short-term trading, it's bringing more volatility into the market?
As I was saying, okay, can I suggest one thing? A lot of you will be interested in very, very stock market specific questions. The others will find it extremely boring. If you like, I'll take a 2-minute break while those who are not interested can leave the room. If that's okay by you, because ultimately I don't have any intention of holding you here. As I said, I'm a salesman. If the sale is made, close the doors. Would any of you like to take a break? Okay, we'll continue in that case. Yes, why is short selling allowed? You know, short selling is one of the best ways to encourage volatility in the market because you sell stock which you don't own. SEBI has actually given guidelines by which FIs and funds can short sell. The reason is, the biggest concern today is that last year was a great year. plenty of money was coming into the market. But we have to create liquidity in the market in the year forward, and liquidity is actually drying up in the system. Short selling is essentially, what is short selling? It is vyaj badla, right? What are you doing? You are creating liquidity in the system. So I think anything that increases the liquidity of the system, increases the option for hedging, increases the option of paired trades, is actually good for the market. Any of you are unfamiliar with the concept of a paired trade? Paired trade means I do two trades which are either equal or opposing. I buy Tisco or Tata Steel as it is now called at 100 rupees. At the same time, I find that there is a futures on Tata Steel which is trading at 110 rupees. I simultaneously buy one and sell. That is called a paired trade. Second, I believe very, very strongly that infrastructure space is going to do very well. IT space is going to do very badly. If I am an investor, what do? I will go and buy, let's take an index stock. Let us take Reliance Industries. I go and buy Reliance Industries. Right? But if I am a pair trader, I can make benefit two ways. One, I can buy Reliance. Two, I can sell Infosys. So I make the advantage of the upside of Reliance and the downside of Infosys. By doing these things, what happens is that you're creating liquidity in the system, because ultimately the liquidity, that is a deal because somebody else is having opposing view. Our system suffers from the one biggest thing, the reason that we are not treated on par with the emerged market is that we do not have instruments to create greater liquidity.
Yeah, we'll take two questions. Please raise your hands if you want to ask.
So my question really is, you mentioned a couple of things like China is now developing a recasting district. This sort of information is not easily available in the newspaper. So as students, what would you suggest that some articles or probably some books that we should
I don't know whether your library subscribes to magazines like The Economist and all that. If it does, then those are the magazines which you should look. Bloomberg News, Economist, these are not great places to look for information. But then all of you are in the internet generation. I would suggest subscribe to a few very, very good websites which are available. And today you can subscribe on your credit card for $1 website. And that will give you the information.
So my question is with respect to the agricultural loans. You said that most loans have been waived off, but at the same time they are arranging for securitization of the same. Now, my question is, if at all these loans are non-performing assets, as in we don't expect any returns out of them, how would a securitization of these loans really work? I mean, would it really?
I don't know whether they plan securitization. Is it there in the budget?
So, you said that.
No, I just said that they're giving liquidity. They're not securitizing these loans because these loans are obviously written off. There won't be any question of securitization. In the subprime crisis, it came about because in the US, such subprime loans were securitized. Here, the government is just either buying it off or telling the bank you write it off. One way or the other. I don't think they will securitize this because there is no security behind it.
So this year the government has introduced commodity transaction tax. This will basically affect the farmers who hedge their stocks. So is it not an indirect way to tax the farmers, because on general the agricultural income goes tax free. So is it not a way to tax the farmers?
The vast majority of the farmers in India are not sophisticated enough to do any form of hedging. The few who are really in the commodity space are largely traders. They are agri traders who are getting more sophisticated, and therefore they are investing in getting a terminal and doing it. You are right, much of this was being shown as agricultural income. It will at least bring them into the tax.
Any more questions? This is the last one.
You said about subprime crisis. Do you see any impact of it coming to India?
I believe about a few of the leading banks have minor treasury exposures to subprime loans, but these are multi-layered ones. If you are familiar with the way subprime is structured, at the lowest level, there's housing loans and credit card loans which are very, very poor quality. But at the next level, these are created into a basket which are over-collateralized. These baskets, which means that, okay, it's a very stupid concept, but they take two loans which have 50% probability of default, put it together and say it's 100% safe loan. This is one way of, because 50% of 50% is really 50%. Then, these baskets are again insured. Once they're insured, they're rated as AAA. Some of these insurers are in deep trouble. Some of them are not. These insured AAA rated instruments have been sold to money market funds. And yes, some of our banks have invested in those money market funds which are invested in these securities. So we have an indirect exposure but no direct exposure as far as we know. But the total magnitude of the subprime crisis is about $500 billion, which is roughly half the GDP of India. And as of today, what has been discovered is about $110 billion. So only, I mean, it's really tip of the iceberg. So I don't know how it's going to play out, which is why nobody really openly comments about the total magnitude.
Yeah, we'd like to end this session over here. Thank you, sir. It was a wonderful talk. Show a lot of finance people over here. I've learned a lot of good things. As a token of appreciation, I would ask Vivin to please present a commentary to Mr. Krishnamurthy.